what to leave in, what to leave out. Against the wind, we were running against the wind. We found ourselves seeking shelter against sin. Years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? How many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many times can a man look out before he can see the sky? How many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? And how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
I can't do that. Alright, flash. Microphone. Go that way.
Maybe I love you. Why all the night? If I made you feel sad, you were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. Baby, I guess I never told you. I'm so happy that you're mine. Little things I should have said and done, but I just never took the time. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. Tell me that your sweet love that desire give me one more chance to keep you satisfied. Keep you things I should have said and done. I just never took the time. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind. You were always on my mind.
Yeah.
Let's say goodbye with a smile, dear, just for a while, dear. We must part. Don't let this parting upset you. I'll not forget you, sweetheart. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies chase those dark clouds far away, and I will just say hello to the folks that you know. Tell them you won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as I saw you go, you were singing song. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
I reckon he should. He used to play at all the dances. Jimmy the colour too.
Yes, that's the face, yes.
Sue thinks he's one too.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yes. Helps her as well too. A couple of times with you too.
Say goodbye, my own true lover, as we sing a lover's song. How it breaks my heart to leave you, now the carnival is gone. High above, the dawn is waking, and my tears are falling rain. For the carnival is over, we may never meet again. Like a drum, my heart was beating, and your kiss was sweet as wine. But the joys of love are fleeting, for Pierrot and Columbine. Now the harbor light is falling. This will be our last goodbye. Though the carnival is over, I will love you till I die. Like a drum, my heart was beating, and your kiss was sweet as wine. But the joys of love are fleeting, for Pierrot and Columbine. Now the harbor light is falling. This will be our last goodbye. Though the carnival is over, I will love you till I die. Though the carnival is over, I will love you till I die.
What can you say to someone who has always been one of the most essential parts of your world? Someone who took you by the hand when you were little and helped to show you the way. What do you say to someone who stood by to help you grow, providing love and strength and support so that you could become the person that you are today? What can you say to let him know that he is the best there is, and that you hope you've inherited some of his wisdom and his strength? What would you say if you were given the chance? Maybe you just say, "I love you, Dave," and hope he understands. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and on behalf of David's family, I would like to thank you for your attendance at this service in honour of the life of David Russell Ralston. If you have a mobile phone on you, you might like to take a moment to turn it off or onto silent as your mark of respect. I'd also like to remind you if you could take a minute to sign the guest book at the conclusion of the service if you didn't catch it on your way over already. My name is Simon, along with Jessie and each of the staff at Parkside Funerals. It's been our privilege to have been invited to care for David after his death and to hold his service of farewell here at the Graveside, reuniting Dave with his beloved Faye. There are undoubtedly some people who unfortunately cannot attend today's service, and so I'd like to mention that we're thinking of them as they might be taking a few quiet moments to think of us here today as well. For those people watching this service via live stream, or perhaps at a later time, I welcome you as well, for your presence is equally valued, whether you're here in person or in spirit. After our service here today, you're all warmly invited to join with the family for a time of refreshment at the Circular Head Rec Centre in Nelson Street. It's at this time maybe that you would like to share your own memories and your own stories of Dave with his family. So today we have come together from different places, and we're all at different stages on our own life's journey. Our paths are varied. We look at life in different ways, but there is one thing that we all have in common. At one point or another, our lives have touched David's life. And so we've put aside our usual activities for a while, and we've gathered here to give expression to the thoughts, the feelings that well up inside of us at this time, and also because, in one way or another, David's death has affected us all. It's at times such as this that we stop the onrush of our own lives and we pause for just a while and reflect upon Dave's life of some 91 years. And just as we would meet to say goodbye to anyone we love who was leaving on any journey, we are meeting to say some of our goodbyes to Dave. We send him off with our love, maybe a few tears, but also with our blessings, and most of all, with our gratitude for having had him as a husband, a dad, a father-in-law, a pop, a brother and brother-in-law, an uncle, and a friend. His influence on the people closest to him has been profound, but that influence does not end with his death, but it will continue on into the future. I'm told Dave was one of those people who understood that a family was a place to belong, and just as he had a place in a loving family, when his children brought their partners, and then their children, and then their children came into his life, he made sure that they all felt a part of his family. David was the much-loved husband of Gwendolyn, better known as Faye, a loved dad and father-in-law to Donald and Helen Ralston, Gayleen and Milton de Jong, Glenn and Jackie Ralston, and Carolyn and Dale Newell. He's the adored Pop or Poppy of Jay and Brooke, Adam and Rachel, Ashley, Tony and Amy, Kurt and Jacqueline, Clinton and Sammy, Megan and Michael, Emma and Wesley, Laura and Callum, Aidan and Callum, an adoring and loved Great Poppy Dave or Great Poppy Rolly of his 14 great-grandchildren, a loved son of the late Russell and Ella Ralston, and a much-loved brother of Max, of Jack and Daphne, Mavis and Harry, Jean and Roy, Murray and Judy, a loved brother-in-law and uncle to their families. Perhaps these words may come to us today from Dave himself, and they say, I leave myself to your memory with love. I leave my thoughts, my laughter, my smile, and my dreams to you, who I have treasured. I give you what no thief can steal, the memories of our times together, the tender moments, the success that we shared, the hard times, the fun times, and the times that brought us closer together, and the roads that I have travelled side by side with many of you. And so with those words in mind, to begin to tell us some of the story of Dave's life, I would like to invite two of his grandsons, Jay and Kurt, to come forward and share the eulogy.
Good morning, everybody. So, here we go. David Russell Ralston had no right to live to the age of 91. If even half the stories I've heard in the last week are true, Jay and I have been asked by the family to share some of those stories and recount key moments of this great man's life. In his spidery scrawl, Pop kept a daily journal, and about 10 years ago, he wrote in more detail of his time at Donorlan, Sunnyside, Marrawar, and his early years at Moorbanner. These notes have proved invaluable over the last few days and will be treasured, a treasured piece of the Ralston family history going into the future. What stands out to me is his grit he developed in the face of significant challenges early in his life, the determination to better himself, and his enduring love of family. Born on a warm spring day, not too dissimilar to this, on the 7th of October 1931 at the Devon Hospital in Latrobe, Pop's early childhood was formed in the years of the Great Depression. On the same day, on the other side of the world, in South Africa, a young boy was also born, named Desmond Tutu. Pop wants it known that being 6 hours older is better than being an archbishop. Pop was the fourth child of 6 to his parents Ella and Russell Ralston. His siblings were Max, Jack, Mavis, Jean and Murray. The family lived in Donorlan until Pop was 7. This was the height of the Great Depression, so we know life there would have been tough for them all. They moved to Sunnyside, just outside of Ralston, when Pop was able to start school. He recounts his first day as being traumatic because he wanted to stay with his sister, Mavis, but the school wouldn't let him start school in grade 4. He reckons it was a 5 to 6 kilometre walk to school from Sunnyside. I don't think there was much snow about at that time. Pop talks about having bad asthma and terrible eczema at that age, and we can be sure of how hard that would have been without today's modern medicines. Pop was about 10 when the family made the long and difficult journey from Ralston to Marrawar. He remembers planks being put down in order to cross the Detention River. Apparently those planks were still on standby as recently as last week on the Cam River Bridge. World War II was in full swing, and even in Marrawar, they had to black out the windows at night because they could be seen from the sea. Despite this, Pop said he enjoyed his days at Marrawar and recounts fondly time spent fishing with his brothers. The family were on a dairy farm at this time, and Pop helped out with this. He finished formal schooling at 15 and went on to work for J.N. Nichols and Sons in their cheese factory at the end of Hanson's Road. He was there for 2 years before an injury during a football game would prove to be his biggest test of his grit. As a result of the injury, he developed an infection of his shin bone. He spent 3 months in the Devon Hospital, Latrobe, where every 3 hours he was injected with a modern marvel, penicillin. He found out the hard way, though, that he was allergic to penicillin and had to be transferred to Launceston for further treatment. He remembers being in the same ward as polio patients and feeling badly for them having to be in iron lungs. He was in Launceston for several weeks and had only a few visits from his mother because it was a 3-day round trip to get from Marrawar to Launceston. When he eventually got back to his family at Marrawar, it was decided that continuing to work at the cheese factory wasn't going to be good for his leg. His dad eventually arranged for Pop to work as a talisman at the soldier settlement in Moorbanner. Pop does have fond and happy memories of his childhood and adolescence, but what stands out most to me is the grit that he and his family would have had to have had. I knew Pop as a mechanic and an all-round tinkerer, and I think this came from a Meccano set he was given when he was about 12 or 13 years old. In his words, it was the most enjoyable thing I was ever given. So it was at the soldier settlement where Pop moved from being a talisman to eventually operating machinery and used to clear land, which was the purpose of the soldier settlement. And then he moved on to the maintenance and operating and fixing those same machines. He got his driver's license, and this is an important part to Pop's story because without it, he wouldn't have had the job of driving the migrant workers to church on a Sunday or picking up the mail from the Morbana post office. This is where Gwendolyn Fay comes into the story. He talks about his early courtship of Nan, largely as memories spent around the piano or at concerts and dances in Stanley. I will return to their love for each other and their family later, but they spent their first years as a married couple at New Haven, at the very back of Morbana, and this is where Pop began working as a mechanic. The routine was that Pop would drive the school bus full of Morbana kids to Forest District to Forest District School, and then go on to a day's work as a mechanic for Jeff Bauer in Forest. He'd then pick up the kids at 3 p.m. and drive them home again. This meant that Nan was at home with 2 young children, Uncle Donald and Mum, for quite a while by herself, with no phone contact or anything like that. It was around 1960 when Nan and Pop built what we all know as the Ralston family house at Morbana. Nan took on more responsibilities at the post office, and Pop opened his own garage. For over 10 years, Pop serviced the local Morbana community as their mechanic. After this, he went on to work for UMT, United Milk Tasmania, as a diesel mechanic, where he stayed until he retired in the mid-1990s. I actually can remember visiting Pop in the workshop as a little kid and constantly being warned not to go near the pit. Even in his spare time, you could find Pop in his workshop working on something. And as messy as his workshop sometimes got, he knew where everything was. The move to Edgerton Beach in 1995, when he retired, meant downsizing and taking only his most precious of tools with him, which means, as the rough bush mechanic he'd call himself, there weren't many. Jay will provide us with more stories of Pop's bush mechanic skills and a few others. So what's left of me to cover is what would be the most important to Pop, his family. I said earlier that he met Nan when he lived in Morbana. They married in 1953. Pop and Nan were cut from the same cloth in that growing up, they both knew hardship, which possibly helped them to enjoy a marriage that lasted for 57 years. I think another factor in their success was a shared sense of humour, which may have been forged during their honeymoon. The trip around Tasmania started at the top pub in Wynyard, where the bathroom was down the hallway from their bedroom. Having forgotten to take their key with them, they found themselves locked out of their room on the first night. Apparently, there were reports of Pop seen climbing a ladder to get back into their room. He was in full view of the public in his singlet and underpants. Uncle Donald and Mum were their first children, born not long after they were married and only a couple of years apart. They were at New Haven at this time. It was 7 years later that Uncle Glenn was born, and a couple of years later, Auntie Carolyn came along, by which time the family were living at Morbana. I've never known Pop to raise his voice, swear, or really even get crabby, but his children, particularly Uncle Glenn, may know different. There's a very good chance. As well as a shared sense of humour, they also shared a sense of adventure. Twice they hooked up a caravan to their car and set off to explore Australia. I can only imagine the special memories they would have made together during this time, and I hope that Nan was able to hold on to these in her final days. Nan and Pop enjoyed the company of 11 grandchildren at various stages, and for various reasons, we all spent many a day at the Morbana and Edgerton Beach. We all have our special memories and stories of these times. I have vivid memories of Pop cleaning the catch of blackfish that Nan and I would bring home, and him complaining that they were undersized and still alive. Even now, I can taste the porridge that he would make us in the morning at Morbana. Somehow he managed to turn a relatively healthy breakfast of porridge into something that would block an artery today. The simple bowl of cooked oats, he'd allow us to add as much sugar as we'd like, usually enough to create a nice 5 or 10 mil layer across the bowl, followed by as much cream as we wanted, and then a dash of milk. It's probably a good thing that I've never been able to replicate that. And naturally, of course, as soon as Pop loaded us up with sugar in the morning, he'd take off to work and leave us with Nan. Nan only got a brief time with one of the 14 great-grandchildren, but I know Pop sure did. But Pop made sure that his love more than made up for that. Nan would have been proud. Pop's story is not of wealth, privilege, and opportunity. He was a self-made man. Everything Nan and Pop had was a result of their hard work, grit, and determination. He was always ready to listen, and he offered wise counsel. His mind was sharp, and he could hold his own in a conversation on just about any topic. 91 years is a long life by any measure, and it has been impossible to cover those 91 years in the detail they deserve here today. You will each have your own memories of Pop and stories to tell. Just as you treasure them, he would have done the same. His friends were important to him. Pop was a humble man, not one for pomp and ceremony, so his preference was that today be simple. But to me, Pop was a great man and his life truly worth celebrating. His legacy is that all who knew him are better for having done so. It's been an honour and a privilege to share this reflection today, and I now hand over to Jay to share some more memories of Pop.
Hi, and thank you all for coming today. I'm Jay Ralston, the eldest of Donald and Helen, and Dave's eldest grandson. Today, I have the honour of speaking to you about Pop, aka Dave, Dad, brother, uncle, or Poppy Dave. We're here today to remember the life and legacy that he leaves us. Always a hard worker, he lived a simple life, enjoyed mechanicking, the bush, and above all family, and Nan or Faye. Pop was known and loved by many far and wide, and this was evident at his 90th birthday party last year, where 100 odd people came from far and wide to celebrate. Who'd have thought that from just him and Nan, Pop has now contributed an extra 29.5 people and direct descendants to the population. This is a sad day for everyone here, but there's no doubt that Pop would have wanted us to eat, drink and be merry and celebrate and reflect upon the wonderful life he lived. He has said for the last 7 or 8 years that he's not afraid of dying, and that getting old just means you have to suffer more. He was a tough old bugger and probably had longer than he was due because of his stoicism and love for his family. Right to the end, Pop was cheeky. After seeing him at Everton Park last Saturday and speaking with the lovely staff there, he was still giving the girls a hard time right up to the last. His body may have failed him, but his mind and cheekiness stayed with him right to the end, the way he would have wanted it. So today, I wanted to share a few yarns with you and have a laugh at Pop's expense. I know some of the things my daughters will always remember about Pop is going to his house and playing with his marbles, or Skyping him and getting a laugh when he pulled his falsies out. Pop was old school. He was tough and practical, as you needed to be growing up in the Great Depression and then the Second World War. But he did love his family and he loved seeing his many friends. He loved nothing more than spending time with us grandkids, and in later years we took second place to the great grandkids. I was lucky enough to have him around this long. I remember many fun times with both Nan and Pop at Morbanna, and just as many stories it is told that I didn't witness firsthand, but will never forget nonetheless. Pop was a self-taught bush mechanic, and according to others, much better on the tools than many who had their ticket. However, I'm certain one unit at Tech he would have benefited from was OH&S, as he had more lives than a cat. The most famous story would have to be when Pop had a little incident at the workshop at Morbanna. From Dad's point of view, this is how it went down. Pop was in the shed, welding up a petrol tank. Nan and Pop and the kids were inside when they heard an almighty boom. Dad turned around just in time to see the roof of the shed come back down to earth and land on the walls again. It cracked the kitchen window, and Dad remembers Pop crawling out of the workshop from a cloud of dust and smoke with just a small trickle of blood running down his forehead, and him not being able to hear a word from the ringing in his ears. Up until the day they left Morbanna, Pop would take great pride in showing anyone that would listen where the roof of the shed at Morbanna was 4 inches skew with. Dad and Auntie Fred both told me a story of him lighting a bonfire at a Morbanna community night. He made a habit of using the annual bonfire as a way of disposing of 12 months' worth of old tyres from his garage. But instead of using jiffies, he would, for months beforehand, empty the dregs of petrol drums, sump oil and diesel onto the bonfire. When he eventually got it going, it went woof, blew the bonfire to smithereens, sucked Pop in towards the bonfire and took his eyebrows with it. Dad shared a memory of when Pop sold a truck and loader to Alan Beattie. Dad was walking around the gravel pit in time to see Pop drive off with the loader on the back of the truck, off to drop them off for sale. And he didn't get too far before the loader came off the back of the truck, bounced a few times before coming to a stop. Pop spent that night putting the roof back on the loader as it flew off as it bounced down the road. Auntie Fred has a memory of Pop running 44-gallon drums full of diesel up to some more sawmills at the back of Morbanna. He had the truck and trailer loaded with diesel, and he had to go over the Dip Falls Bridge, which is at the bottom of a rise. On the far side of the bridge, he missed a gear and lost momentum. He started rolling backwards when the brakes failed on the truck. He ended up with the trailer full of diesel half off the bridge, and it took a dozer to pull him out. My brother Adam remembers sitting down with everyone and watching some of Pop's camcorder footage from one of their trips around Australia. Pop was sitting in the car whilst recording Nan walking across a river crossing in Cape York to check it for depth. Pop narrated the vision by saying, "And there goes old crockbait again." Nan was hearing the narration for the first time during this viewing, and she hadn't until then considered the risk of crocs. I wasn't there for this one, but it's widely talked about how Pop went fishing with Russell Ling off Edgecombe. They were pulling a net in close to shore when the outboard stalled. Some waves caught them sideways and capsized them. They swam into the rocks and walked home. Dale went out afterwards and retrieved the dinghy for them. He was a bit shaken up, but in typical fashion, he just shrugged it off and laughed. Rolly shared a few memories with me through the week. Rolly reckons he was about 18 when he was helping Pop in the garden at Morbanna. Pop was removing some chicken wire stuck in a hedge, while Rolly was on a whippersnipper with a sawtooth blade. 1 minute Pop was on Rolly's left, and the next he was on the right, unbeknownst to Rolly. He swung the whippersnipper around and snagged Pop's shoulder. Pop didn't even know until they told him, and they took him to hospital where they stitched him up with a lazy 70 stitches. Rolly was also talking to some old fellas through the week, and as far as they can work out, Pop was probably the last one remaining who worked on the soldier settlements clearing land after the Second World War. He would have been one of the youngest at the time, and is probably the last remaining in the district now. Rolly had another story that Pop would tell, clearing bush with dozers and blowing up the stumps of what was left with gelignite. And at times the flies would get quite thick in summer, especially after they dug a hole to do their business. Pop once thought of a novel way to get rid of the flies. So after taking care of his business this day, he lit a stick of gelignite and threw it in the hole. No more flies. One of the things that's come across with speaking to everyone was just how strong Pop was. Rolling 44-gallon drums full of diesel with one hand, and when it came time to lift them on the truck, there was no high ebb in those days, so he'd throw them up empty or full on the truck by himself. He's still the only person I know that's learned how to use a computer after retirement. And tens of thousands of emails, or dirty emails later, we're all better off for it. Even if a few stray ones did make it to my daughter by accident. On his last day with us, I got Pop to retell one last time the story of how he went to the Moorbanda train station to pick up a brand new tractor and drive it to the soldier settlement. It was supposed to have water in the tyres to weigh it down, but it didn't yet. So he and a colleague roped down the suspension seat so I wouldn't bounce too much on it. Halfway there, when the rope holding the seat down let go, he sat up too high to be able to reach the brake pedal, got up too much speed, too much bounce, and bounced clean off the road. The tractor ended up upside down on top of him in a ditch, and the only thing that saved him was the fact that his head was in the ditch. Otherwise, the steering wheel would have decapitated him. The thing he was most upset about, though, was the gear stick went through his brand new red knitted jumper. The last day we spent with Pop, we reminisced about the time he taught me to drive his old Fergie. I would have been about 8, and Pop gave me about 30 seconds worth of instructions on how to drive and said, "Off you go, boy, you'll be right." He was on the carryall as we headed down the steepest hill on his farm. We got going a bit quick, so I put the clutch in to slow us down. That resulted in the opposite. Pop bounced clean off the carryall because we were going too fast and bouncing. He was yelling at me what I now know to be, "Let the clutch out and hit the brake." About 10 metres before the creek at the bottom, I fluked doing just that. And Pop drove the Fergie home after that. Pop's going to be forever remembered by many, including myself and family, and we'll forever love and treasure the memories and the fact we had him in our lives. He's back together again with Nan, and I can see that every sunny morning from now on, Nan will be up there and start the day by saying, "Lovely day, David." Thank you.
And now Madeline and Harrison would like to come and share a tribute on behalf of the great-grandkids.
We have written a poem to share our memories of Great Pop. He had 14 great-grandchildren. Each of us loved him so much.
Our Great Pop. He would always make sure our money boxes were full. Thanks, Great Pop.
Playing with the marbles was the best thing to do at Great Pop's place. Thanks, Great Pop.
All the tales he could tell of growing up, of mischief and of yesteryear. I'll miss these, Great Pop.
You loved to fill your shelves with pictures of us in our school uniforms. You were so proud of us.
You were always at all our gatherings, watching over us and keeping us safe. Now you're watching us over from heaven.
Your cuddles were whiskery and you held us tight. Your hands were smooth and your eyes were bright.
You were very old and we know you were very tired, but you always had time for our visits. We will miss popping in to say hello.
Thanks for being our Great Pop.
We love you very much.
Well done. And finally, Clint, yeah?
I've just got a few words from Tony Yeager. Couldn't be here today, so I've got a few memories to pop, which we all do. I met Dave about 60 years ago when I started courting Jenny. At this time, he'd given up his school bus run and his income was derived from the workshop and his fuel agency through TJ Murphy and Sons in Smithton. Not only did he supply fuel to the local farmers and loggers, but at the time Port Ladder was being constructed and he supplied fuel to some of the processors there. He was pretty enterprising and he served the local community and others through his mechanical business that he operated from his workshop next to their home. He was a whiz on Fergie tractors and there wasn't a job that he wouldn't tackle, which was quite extraordinary for a man that was self-taught. One of his farm customers wanted to bracket water to his farm diesel tank, so Dave had it on the back of his truck, drove it to the workshop and proceeded to weld to it. This resulted in an almighty explosion, which fortunately blew the opposite end out of the tank. Dave got knocked back against the lathe and every window was blown out of the garage. Some sheets of iron blew off the walls and every sheet loosened. A panic call from Faye had Jenny, Cherie, Gavin and I quickly to Morbanna, and we helped put this back together. Fortunately, Dave was not injured, but if the end of the tank next to Dave had blown out, this gathering would have been many years earlier. Dave liked a bit of fun, and one day I was helping him put a gearbox back in his truck. I was holding it up underneath the truck and couldn't move until he got a couple of bolts in the bell housing. And then he let this rotten fart go that he must have been saving for the occasion. And he laughed because he knew I had no option but to suffer it. Dave, along with Faye, had a sizable family to rear, and they would have struggled at times to keep their necks above water. In spite of that, he was a very community-minded person. He did a lot of charitable work from time to time. When the 1967 fires occurred in southern Tasmania, the whole community of Circle Head pitched in to collect hay donated by farmers and transport it to the railheads to send south. Dave was one of those who would not only get in and work, but also donated the use of his truck and fuel as his part to help in the need. Eventually, his business wasn't able to support him at Morbanna, so he managed to obtain a position as a mechanic at the Duck River Butter Factory garage in Smithton, where he worked for a number of years until his retirement. During his retirement, he and Faye had a caravanning trip that took them right around Australia. We met up with them in the Kimberley and travelled from Kununurra back to Broome. It was then we decided to go for a couple of nights to Cape Leveque. And that's when I found out he had a bit of cunning in him. As we're about to drive across the sand dunes to Johnston River, he said, "You drive, Tony." And then we got bogged in the sand. Faye panicked and got a bit hysterical, but she couldn't blame Dave. He spent his early years in Marrawar, and he could tell you all the fine detail of families and people in the general right until the end. Dave Ralston was truly one of nature's gentlemen and was very fond of all his family. I know that they'll miss him all dearly, as many of his friends and acquaintances will. Rest in peace, Dave. You've earned it. Tony.
And finally, Gayleen.
I'm the last one. Right. Dad, as tough as he was in our years growing up, has showed his softer side in his later years. He spent quality time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, which was so lovely to see. I am sure he was making up for this, as he often told me he felt sad that Mum was not able to see and experience the lives of their great-grandchildren. His neighbours, Wayne and Maxine Marthick, brought in his paper, collected his mail and checked in on him frequently, along with Kerry Wilson, who lived opposite, were always aware when Dad needed assistance. Dad asked me frequently to trim the lily-pilly bush outside his window, and when I asked him why, he answered, "I just want to keep my eye on Kerry." Thank you all for your friendship and care you displayed for Dad. Donald and Helen living close by, and Jackie, who paid her weekly visits along with the home care girls from Emerton Park, all enabled Dad to remain at home independently for as long as he did. He was ever so appreciative of whatever anyone did for him. I could tell in the last few months that Dad was preparing himself for this day. Dad developed pneumonia about 6 weeks ago and was admitted to hospital. The doctor called in the family, and of course everyone arrived over a few days. We all thought Dad was on his way, but no, he rallied again and said he loved seeing everyone and decided to stick around for a bit longer. Dad realised he was unable to look after himself at home and then was offered a room at Emerton Park, where he lived for approximately 3 more weeks. He was cared for so well by all the staff. For that we are forever grateful. I bought him an electric wheelchair to use to recoup some of his mobility and independence. When he seen it, his face lit up for a short time. He climbed on it and rode that chair as if he had driven it all his life. Certainly better than me. Unfortunately, he only used that wheelchair once. In the next couple of days, I could see the sparkle fading from his brown eyes. In his own way, he was saying goodbye to us all. As he would say, I would like to go out with all my marbles. And on the 30th of October 2022, Dad fulfilled his wish and he died the way he wanted, peacefully and with his dignity. He said goodnight and went to sleep. Just remember, he hasn't left us. He has just gone before us. Thank you.
Thanks, Gayleen and Clinton, and Madeline and Harrison, Kurt and Jay. What awesome memories you have as a family, and I thank you for sharing them with us. As Gayleen just mentioned, Dave's life came to its end last Sunday morning, October 30, 2022, at Emerton Park Home. One of the things that we often use in a service like this is music. Sometimes the words to a song can say all of those things that our hearts want to say, but our minds can't seem to put into words. And so I invite you to listen to this song as we have a time of quiet reflection on what Dave's life has meant individually to each of you.
Tells his father how he really feels. A handshake or a pat on the back is all that he reveals. I'd like to right that wrong here in this little song. Thank you for shaping my life. Thank you for teaching me all you can. You are no ordinary man. No, no, no. You make me everything I am. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for showing me the way. And thank you for being there when I need you. Thank you for every single day. Now I've been blessed with a son of my own. Thank you for your guiding hand. Thank you for making my dreams come true. You're an extraordinary man, and I hope you're as proud of me as I am proud of you. Thank you for giving me life. Thank you for showing me good from bad. I guess I'm only really trying to say thank you for being my dad. Even though the years drift away, I never took the time just to say I love you, and I always have. And thank you for being my dad. Thank you for being my dad.
So with those words of thanks still in our minds, I'd like to firstly say thank you to Dave himself, and I'd like to thank him for being him. I'd like to thank him for being a wonderfully loving and supportive husband to Faye, and for the wonderful loving relationship that they shared until her passing some 12 years ago. Gayleen told me the other day that just after Faye died, Dave's health was in decline and they thought that he was going to pass away, and he was admitted into the LGH where he was diagnosed with a broken heart. But after a few weeks of respite and a little bit of TLC, he was able to return home and continue living independently until just recently. That just enforced to me the depth of Dave and Faye's love for each other. I'd like to thank Dave for being the best dad and father-in-law, pop and great pop to his family that he could be, for his softening up in these last few years since the great-grandchildren have been around, for his fiercely independent personality, for his hard work, his giving personality to provide the best life and upbringing for his family that he could. For Dave's skills in the kitchen, I'm told that his pot of soup was among the best that you could get. And for his ability to fix any physical ill with a roll of paper towel and a few rubber bands. And now I say thank you also to Dave's family, his friends, and I'm sure maybe this comes today from Dave himself. Thank you for being a part of his life. Thank you for supporting him, for loving him. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time to visit, to phone and message. Your support has meant so much to the family. One of the constants in Dave's life has been his faith. Perhaps Dave wasn't the sort of person to be the first at church on a Sunday, but it's always been shown in the way he lived his life, his kindness, and the acts of selflessness that he has demonstrated so many times over so many years. All the times he helped strangers get their cars back on the road. And so the family have asked that we share the Lord's Prayer as a mark of respect. The words are printed into your service sheets, and I invite you to join them in saying with me, if you wish. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. When I am gone, release me, let me go. I have so many things to see and do. You must not tie yourself to me with tears. Be happy, we had so many years. I gave you my love, and you can only guess how much you gave me in happiness. I thank you for the love you each have shown, but now it's time I've travelled on alone. So grieve for me a while if grieve you must, then let your grief be comforted by trust. It's only for a while that we must part, so hold all the memories within your heart. I'll not be far away, for life goes on, so if you need me, call, and I will come. Though you cannot see or touch me, I will be near, and if you listen with your heart, you will hear all of my love around you, soft and clear. Then when you must come this way alone, Faye and I will greet you with a smile and a welcome home. Dave now moves into that part of our life that we call the past. Life will be very different without him, but his influence lives on. You will love and you will remember him for the rest of your lives. And so, as we begin to recognise that we have done all that we can for Dave, we release him into our memory and we prepare to say our most final of goodbyes to him. We recognise that we have done all that we can and acknowledge that our last act of care is to lay this, your well-used body, Dave, to rest. And so into the darkness and the warmth of the earth, we lay you down. Into the sadness and the smiles of our memories, we lay you down. Into the cycle of living and dying, we let you go. May you rest here in peace, in fulfilment, in loving. These then are the last rites in the natural life of David, Russell, Ralston, Dave. We have remembered him, and now we say farewell. So tenderly and reverently, we commit Dave's body to be buried in this grave, returning to the warm and gentle earth, the earth from which all life comes, and to which in the end all life returns, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. With all of our love, Dave, we bid you farewell. And some final words to close, and that says, to the living I am gone, to the sorrowful I will never return, and to the faithful I have never left. I cannot be seen, but I can be felt. So as you stand upon a shore, gazing at the beautiful sea, remember me. As you look upon a flower and admire its simplicity, remember me. Remember me in your heart, your thoughts and your memories of the times we loved, the times we fought, the times we laughed. For if you always think of me, never will I have gone. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our service. As we listen to a last piece of music, I invite you to come forward and to say your own private, quiet goodbye to Dave. Maybe place a flower or some leaves on his coffin as a last token of the life and the love that you have shared together. I also remind you of the family's invitation to join them for refreshments at the rec centre when you are ready. Thank you.
Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye. Cheerio, here I go on my way. Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye. Now the tears here make it day. Give me a smile I can keep all the while in my heart while I'm away. Till we meet once again, you and I. Wish me luck as you wave me goodbye. Wave me goodbye. Give me a smile I can keep all the while in my heart while I'm away. come and here, make it gay. Give me a smile I can keep all the while in my heart while I'm away. Till we meet once again, you and I. We relax as you wave me goodbye. As you wave me goodbye. Give me a smile I can keep all the while in my heart while
Boy, what's going on?